And there were lots of things that happened over the last decade and even the last year that have taught me I'm on the path I'm supposed to be on. Things just show up in ways that are just magical. Magical. I can't even explain it. That people have shown up when they needed to. And I find it fascinating to just be on this journey and watch it unfold.
Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And today we're going to talk with my friend Larry. Larry has seemed to always be driven to find purpose in his life. As he started off in his career, he realized it didn't have the purpose he needed. And through outside influences, he realized that he needed to have something more than just the job he was doing. He needed to make a difference. And through repeated patterns, he is now at a place at this last arc of his career where his profession and his purpose are blended in together. He's a remarkable man. It's an excellent conversation. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. So, Larry Kesslin, welcome in.
Thank you very much, sir. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Where to start about me? First and foremost, I am a father. I have two beautiful children that are 24 and 22 that I've helped raise with a partner that we were together for almost 25 years. And I'm a son. I live in San Diego, California. I was born and raised in New York, in and around New York City, and moved here 14 years ago. And I've spent the last 14 years really redesigning my life to find joy in San Diego. I mean, it's an amazing place to live. And I've made it the center of my world. I do everything here. And when I came here, I didn't. And it's been really important for me, especially the last 8 or 9 years, to focus my time and energy on the city where I live. Because I believe that deep, meaningful relationships come from deep, human, heartfelt connection. And that's best to do, I believe, in your own backyard. So that's what I've been doing. And it's been a pleasure. I've met people like you and others that are incredibly purpose-driven. It's funny, when I first started doing business here, people would say, who can I introduce you to? And I would say, it's not a who. And they would say, what are you talking about? It's not a who. And I said, I'm looking for a psychographic. And people would look at me, what's a psychographic? I said, I'm looking for world-changing, get-shit-done dolphins. And people would look at me like, huh? So I love people that know who they are, that want to change the world, that actually do stuff. Because when I moved to San Diego, I met a lot of people that talked about stuff but never did anything. And then this idea of dolphins, sharks, dolphins, and sharks that dress up as dolphins. So the sharks are the takers, the dolphins are the givers, and the sharks dressed up as dolphins, they look like they're givers, but at the end of the day, they're really takers. So I want to find people that are purely givers, and the ones that give, that know that it's the law of reciprocity works, not with the person you give to, but if you give to the right people, the other givers, then the world will get back and things will come back to you the way they should. And I truly believe that's the way that I've looked to live my life, as a dolphin. And I find other dolphins like you and a lot of friends that we have in common all seem to have that common characteristic, is that they're very clear with who they are. They're very clear with what they do and why, and they get stuff done. Like getting this podcast launched, I know is an idea, and now it's actually here. It's really cool to watch you thriving in your element and sitting behind a microphone. It's very cool to watch you.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. And, it's a funny perspective to have that you are starting local, but then going big and broad, right? To start local with a few people that you know, and then the goal is to radiate that out to people that you don't know, that they know, and that it spirals out. And for you to start close to home in San Diego, it's interesting to say that the city that you choose to live in, you want to lean into. When you were growing up, did you lean into the city that you grew up in? And the reason I ask is that I grew up in Pittsburgh. And when I came out to San Diego as an adult, it was completely different. And being raised in Pittsburgh as a child is a completely different whole life experience than being raised in San Diego like my daughters were. So what is it about living in New York and growing up in New York? And did you have that same love of New York and your local area that you do now for San Diego?
It's a really interesting question. The answer is definitely no. I always felt like a fish out of water. I would come here on vacation. My ex's sister lived here. So my ex-sister-in-law lived in Del Mar. She would start out in San Marcos when I first met my ex-wife. And then we would come out here for conferences. I'd come out here for business. I'd come out here for family. I came out here a lot and it always felt like home. And when I moved out here, people would say, do you ever think about moving home? And I said, let me explain something to you. New York is where I was born and raised. This is home.
Sure.
Ever since I moved here, this has felt like home. So I did not dig in the same way. I did start working in my 20s with the same thing I'm doing now. So I always was attracted to working with disadvantaged youth. And that's been a theme my whole life. So now that I'm focused in San Diego, I am very much engaged in inner city youth, boys with no dads or single parent families, and trying to help them improve their lives. So I do a lot of work with Boys to Men mentoring. In New York City, I was involved with the Henry Street Settlement on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I would go down there on a regular basis. I took a bunch of kids from New York City to Colorado in 1993, both a winter program to teach them to ski and a summer program, a ropes course. And after that winter program, I came back and I was working at the small little company called the General Electric Company. And they were the number one company in the world at the time. Jack Welch was the CEO. And I was one of 300,000 employees, and I was a number. And the last night of that week with those 85 inner city kids, I was in this hallway looking at this gymnasium. It was dark. I could smell the wood burning fireplaces. I could see my breath. And we had just spent a week teaching these kids to ski. The guy who founded it was one of 5 Black people that lived in Aspen, Colorado. And he wanted to bring inner city youth there to show them that what's possible in the world. So we would live in these beautiful homes for a week and teach them. And I'm standing there at the end of the week, and all these kids are sitting in this room. And this is a theme that's happened in my life, is I saw these 85 inner city kids having a blast. And I'm this 29-year-old kid with a degree in electrical engineering, sales, doing really well at my job, and I was not happy. There are these kids super happy that have nothing compared to what I had. And I'm sitting there saying, why am I this way? And I came back from that trip on a Saturday night. Monday, I went to work. I'd been promoted 6 months earlier. The gentleman who hired me 5 years earlier, I called him on Monday. And I said, I think I'm done.
Wow.
He's like, what do you mean you think you're done? I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not happy. I asked my boss 3 years earlier. So I was there like 4.5 years. So after 2.5 years-ish, 2 years, I sat down in his office. His name was Vince Tullo. Sorry about the names. So this gentleman was the executive at GE, ended up spending 39 years at GE.
Wow.
And I sit down in his office, and I said to him, this is how I see GE. Tell me where I'm wrong. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, there's 25% of the people that do everything. They get everything sold, they get everything fixed, they get everything serviced, they take care of everything. There's 65% of the employees here that are really nice people that do stuff every day, but what they do doesn't really matter. And then there's 10% of the people that actually cause problems that are trouble. I said, how do you deal with that? The scariest part He did not argue with my numbers.
Really?
So he said, I leave the 25% alone. So here's the 27-year-old Larry thinking if I become a manager at GE, I don't spend any time with the smart people. That's the first thing I thought.
Right.
The next thing he does, he takes the top 10% of the 65 and tries to get them into the 25.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I can spend some time with some marginally intelligent people, try and help them on their career path. And there was a guy there who worked for my boss who recommended me for the job before I got it. And he came and worked for us. He was working for a manufacturer in the industry, and he ended up spending 30 years at GE. And when I got to the office and when he started working there, 6 months in, he's got kids and a family. And I was a single guy who I got along with my boss. That's why I took the job. He was my mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy walks up to me one day and says, what's our boss like? I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, it's so easy for you to walk in and talk to him. And I just have a different relationship with him. How did you do that? I'm like, I didn't do anything. I just spend time with him. I say, can I have some time? And I talk to him about smart things and he gives me feedback and we move on. So he says, I leave the 25% alone. I try and take the top 10% of the 65, get them into the 25. And the rest of my time is managing the noise.
Wow.
And I realized that was not the path for me. So when I got back from this Inner City Kid project, I'd already interviewed with G Medical, didn't get an opportunity there. I interviewed with a couple other divisions within GE, didn't want to do anything within GE. And I said, I just got to go. So I left this was March 2nd of 1993. And April 15th was my last day. And I've been self-employed ever since.
Wow.
It took me 5 years to make a penny.
That is a very gutsy move at that age. And I want to get back to that. I want to get back to that ability for you to have the courage to strike out on your own. Because what was interesting, Larry, is when you first described yourself, your first words you used was a father, and the second word you used was a son. You were with disadvantaged youth. So a question that I have for you is, in your youth, were you advantaged, or you were had an advantageous youth? And clearly
Yes.
that relationship between father and son, right? There's fatherhood, but there's also sonhood. It seems like that's been important to you your whole life, and thinking about that relationship.
Yes, it has been. Yes, it was challenging when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So a turning point in my relationship with my dad was when I was about 31. I went to Landmark Forum, and Landmark asked me to write a letter to one of my parents. So I decided to write a letter to my dad. And the theme of the letter was, I apologize to you for trying to make you out to be the perfect dad. And I'm sorry that I didn't allow you to be the dad that you were, because you weren't the perfect dad that I dreamed of. And moving forward, I just want you to be you. And I want to have a relationship with my father, not the fantasy of what I have for a father.
That's
And
really interesting.
That was 30 years ago.
That's amazing. But so you're at 30 years old, you're in that spate where you've moved out of young adulthood. You're probably now moving out on your own. And there's an interesting passage of time in your for some men in their late 20s and their 30s when they're really figuring out that not young manhood, but more mature manhood, because suddenly you're in a mix of people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and you know people who maybe be married, you know people who may be fathers of their own, and it gets you to question who you are. And I think that's so interesting that you had a vision of a perfect father when you were younger, but your dad's just your dad. He's the best he can be at who he is.
Exactly. That's all he can be. He was not self-aware when I was a kid, and he went broke when I was 10.
Oh.
So that challenge of financial instability. So I was privileged. So we lived in Long Island until I was 5. Then we went to Florida for a year, which is, I think, why I live in San Diego. I realized you can live in a place where there's no winter. And I love that. And then I was ready to kill my parents when they moved us to New Jersey when I was the end of my 6th year. I mean, I turned 7 a month after we moved to New Jersey. And I hated New Jersey. Winter, snow, blah. And I was this really active 6-year-old. And I think at 7, I probably gained 15 pounds as a little kid. The refrigerator became my friend. And I still have to deal with that today. I still deal with that. My relationship to food is if there's one thing in my life that I've had a battle with, and I'm not humongous, I'm not a obese person, but I could easily
Hmm.
be 20 pounds more fit than I am today. And it's all due to my relationship with food.
Wow. That's interesting because you moved to Jersey. You didn't like living in Jersey. Food became this outlet. Um,
I
and
was a
then you
grazer. I'd open the fridge and see what was in there. Moo, moo.
moo, moo, and
Just
graze
give me
through the
some cottage
fridge.
cheese. Give me some cheese. Give me
So,
some whatever.
well, you said your dad went broke at 10 when you were 10. Were you aware of that? Did he make that known
Hmm.
within the family?
Well, things changed.
Hmm.
We lived in a big 5-bedroom house in Short Hills, New Jersey. And my dad sold the house and we moved to Milburn, New Jersey, which is the same school system, different town. So we sold a $150,000 house to buy an $85,000 house, and we lived on the difference for a while. My
Mm-hmm.
dad ended up going to San Francisco for a year trying to figure out how to work. He just made some bad deals, and he was about $250,000 in debt in 1973,
That's a lot.
which today is well over $1 million. He never filed bankruptcy. He borrowed it from a cousin who didn't need it, and he eventually paid it all back.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up selling tax shelters for years and made enough money that he could he could really enjoy his life. And then he retired with enough money to make it last. He's 92. My mom's about to turn 90 in
Wow.
October. My dad will be 93 in October. My dad still plays tennis 3 days a week, even in the 100-degree weather in Florida. I'm like, Dad, you're insane. You got to stay inside. But he was a semi-pro ball player, and he was a so his career shifted when I was about 3 years old. He was a phys ed teacher at a school in Brooklyn called Adelphi Academy. My dad coached baseball, he coached basketball, and I think he coached soccer. The basketball teams, he would recruit kids from all over the New York area.
Hmm.
So in 1959-60, he had two kids, 6'9", on the same high school basketball team. He won, I think, 5 or 6 city championships in New York
Right.
City. Then I have a friend, Miguel De Jesus. I don't know if you know Miguel,
Yeah.
here in town. And I had lunch with Miguel right after I met him 10 years ago. And I'm talking to Miguel, and he's like, oh, I said, where'd you grow up? He said, I grew up on 21st and 1st in Manhattan. I'm like, Stuyvesant Town. He's like, you know Stuyvesant Town? I'm like, yeah, I grew up in New York. I lived on 25th and 2nd for a year before I moved up to the Upper West Side. So we start talking, and he says, I played AAU basketball. And I said, who was your coach? He says, my coach was Rob Rubin. I'm like, hold on a second. That name sounds way too familiar. So I call my dad, and I'm like, Dad, have you ever heard the name Rob Rubin? He's like, that was one of my best friends. He was another coach in New York City at the same time my dad was a coach. And my world's just, this is, you know me well enough that this is how my world
Right.
works.
Right.
Worlds collide on a regular basis with me. I meet lots of people. I try and connect people to each other. That's my gift. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
love to do. That's what God gave me, this ability to filter through people and find really good people and introduce them to other good people. And these serendipity moments just show up.
Yeah.
So but your question was about my dad and going broke. So I'm 10 years old. I get bar mitzvah at 13. My dad's still really struggling. And he needed to save face for the family. So we had a party for 85 people in the house. But
Wow.
I didn't have a party for my friends because we didn't have the money for it.
Sure.
So that's kind of the way things were back when I was a kid. And so when the pandemic hit, my brother and sister and I started weekly video calls with my parents back in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a lot of stuff together. My brother's in Philly, my sister's in Maryland. I'm the youngest of three, boy, girl, boy. And for some reason, I brought up a conversation at one of our family little gatherings on Zoom. I'm like, a friend of mine has a family with like 8 siblings, and every call, they each take a topic and they get to bring up a topic, and they get together every 2 weeks. We're getting together every week. I said, we should rotate topics. My brother's a clinical psychotherapist. And he's like, Larry, we're not going to do that. What question do you want to ask? And what do you want to know?
Right.
So I was like, okay, here's my question. To me, my childhood was really tough. Even though we were not poor, it was not fun. And I said, was it just me, or did your childhood suck too? My brother and sister both said it sucked. So I
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
alone. So even though it was challenging, lots of memories with my brother and sister, my family, but we were raised to be independent.
Mm-hmm.
We are not buddy buddy brother sister. We're
Interesting.
good friends. We love each other. We care about each other. We want the best for each other. But I wouldn't say that I call my brother every day to say hi. We talk once a week on video, still with my parents, every Sunday at 3 o'clock Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Zoom call that my brother's on just about every week. I'm on every other week, and my sister barely shows up now, just because she's had some health issues. So that's how we stay connected as a family. And it was tough growing up having no money in a community where everybody had money. So imagine Short Hills, New Jersey is like La Jolla here in San Diego.
Right. No, that's a hard thing, and especially if your dad had a different lifestyle and then had to change lifestyles. And I guess so you brought up a couple things I think are really interesting about you. First, an independent streak that maybe your dad said, "Hey, you're going to have to figure out how to take care of yourself someday," because I had to figure out how to take care of this family in a strange and goofy way. I did it, but it was really tough for a lot of years. So you need to figure that out. And you have I didn't. So you have an interesting relationship with food that started when you were young. Did you then create, maybe unwittingly or unknowingly, a relationship with money because of what happened with your dad?
So in the last 10 years, so my career, when I left in 1993, I spent 5 years trying to figure out whatever I could figure out. I met a guy on a train. He was starting a radio show about entrepreneurship. I ended up joining him. He gave me equity in the company. He couldn't pay me. And I didn't make a penny for 5 years. Meet my wife. She's making a real living. We ham and egg it for a few years. She leaves her company when our first is born, and my business finally starts to take off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably close to 40. And I build this business with a partner. And by the end of 2014, we had 8 or 9 resources working for us. And there were years where I made a lot of money, like
Mm-hmm.
more money than I think I should make. And it was really cool. It was fun. I was able to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and freedom and all that stuff. And it was just so I think you know my story. I went to Africa in 2012 and saw these people that had nothing. Let's go back to my friends in Aspen, Colorado, the inner city youth
Mm-hmm.
that were happy and had much less than I did. I had the same experience in Africa. I spent a month in Uganda and Kenya and met all these people that were incredibly happy that had nothing.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, this theme is coming back again. And
Right.
why? And when I got back to New York, when I got back to the States, 30-hour flight from Nairobi to Cairo, Cairo to New York, smelling like you don't want to know. I actually picked up my arms to go take my baggage out of the overhead, and I couldn't stand myself. I had to put my arms down, but that's a story for another day. But so I'm in the airport, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, at 28, I defined success for myself.
Hmm.
My definition was the ability to do what I want whenever I want to do it. That was my definition. And that worked for me for 20 years. It did, because I chased freedom. I
Hmm.
chased financial freedom to allow me to have my own time to do what I wanted with. By 2014, I was probably working 4 to 5 hours a day at most. I was making a very good living. I had all these people doing the work for me. I was the BD guy. I knew everybody in the industry. And something happened. That trip to Africa taught me that being successful based on my definition at 28 no longer worked.
Right.
When I was sitting at JFK Airport, I was like, I'm done with success. I need to be significant. And then I went on this journey, and I went to a conference about 7 weeks after I got back from Africa. And I'm actually going to this conference for the first time in 10 years in October. A conference called Opportunity Collaborations down in Mexico. And it's 5 days, 6 days with 400 people from around the world trying to solve world poverty.
Hmm.
So I go to this conference, and the first 3 questions I'm asked in a small group setting called a colloquium: what is poverty? Who gets to define it? And why are we trying to fix it? I mean, explosion of my brain.
Bish.
Like,
Right.
I just saw these people that are poor, right? All the people I saw in Africa were poor. What I came to the conclusion of is that we're poor.
Hmm.
They're impoverished. And there's a difference between poverty and impoverishment. And I started really thinking about that whole process. And it took me about a year and a half before I did a TEDx talk at the beginning of 2014. So it's 18 months later. The TEDx talk was all about the disconnected, connected world. The more technologically connected we become, the more emotionally and spiritually disconnected we become.
Right.
And the less technologically connected we are, the more emotionally and spiritually connected we are. So what I realized is that in Africa, they connect at their heart and we connect in our head. And the reason that we're poor is we are cerebral beings in the United States that Madison Avenue and Hollywood teach us to connect through our intellectual thoughts. And I said that I don't want to be successful anymore. I want to be significant. And about 2 years into that journey, I realized that success without significance isn't success. So I wrote the book Success Redefined, which was my new definition was the ability to do what I want, whenever I want to do it, while being part of something greater than myself. That piece of it was totally missing. So fast forward a couple of years, I walk away from my successful business. My top 2 resources decide to take half my clients. I don't want to compete with them. I don't want to do the business anymore. I don't like my partner anymore. I don't like the industry anymore. And I started talking to people about purpose when I got back from Africa. I'm doing all these presentations on making a difference in the community, and nobody cared. It was like an afterthought. And then I go to these conferences where everybody cared.
Right.
And I said, I want to spend all my time with these people, not the people that don't care. So why am I helping people make money for the sake of making money for people that don't care? What am I doing? And I decided to walk. And we'd already planned a trip around the world with our kids. So we took 6 months. We pulled our kids out of school for a semester. We traveled to Australia and Dubai and Israel and Europe.
Great.
Greece, Turkey, Italy, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, back through Germany, Amsterdam, Bruges, and Paris.
Amazing.
12 countries, 27 Airbnbs. Kids were 13 and 14 when we left. Daughter turned 15 when we were in Rome.
Wow.
And it was an amazing journey. Amazing journey. When I got back, I started in San Diego from scratch. I meditated every morning. My ritual for the 6 months, well, I shouldn't say that. First 2 months, my ritual was to figure out what we were going to do on this trip because I didn't plan much. I planned the first 2 weeks and I bought my ticket around the world on United. That was it. So I had to plan everything while we were traveling. And I walked away from a business after 20 years.
Yeah.
So it took me 2 months to detox.
We'll be right back. It does seem like you have some recurring patterns and themes in your life. Clearly in an awareness of the importance and relationship of sonhood and fatherhood, of extending that to people you don't know. Clearly an understanding of wanting to help people whom are financially not as advantaged, right? Being aware, though, of what you need as Larry to be happy and fulfilled. Where you come back from Colorado, you go into the cubicle grid of GE and you're like, this isn't for me. I have to leave. There's this like almost innate survival instinct. We've mentioned in a couple of episodes before where you have to survive as you.
Trust gut.
You have to.
Trust gut.
And you're like, okay, I'm out. And then again, you go through major transitions, takes you many years to finally find your financial footing. And then you're in the business again. Financially, it's working, but there's a hole in your heart. And you're like, I got to get out. I got to do this again. I have to restart again and find this purpose-driven approach to life. And
Correct.
so what's interesting to me about this is that what you're doing though now is stitching together a purpose and a career, right? Most of us at some point seek some kind of meaning or some type of value or purpose. There are very few that get to stitch a passionate vocation into the everyday and how they make their livelihood. It seems to me
I
that
am beyond privileged to do that.
Right. It seems to me that actually was, where you said before you were seeking freedom. This is actually the definition of freedom for you.
No question. financially, emotionally, spiritually, doing the work I know I do. That so yesterday I sat in circle with 15 boys down in Spring Valley. I drove an hour each way to go sit with them, and I introduced a gentleman who works for the Talent Building Foundation. He helps disadvantaged people get jobs for Lennar and all the big building companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I have made it my purpose right now. I kick off a committee on July 8th with Boys to Men Mentoring. And I want to bring together the entire blue collar community to support the inner city boys of our city. So those kids that don't see a future of college need a path. They need to be shown what's possible. They need mentors that are electricians and plumbers. They
Sure.
don't need entrepreneurs, some entrepreneurs, but they need people that look like them, that have gotten past their own stuff and can go. So I've been asked to head up the corporate giving campaign for Boys to Men Mentoring, which is a 26-year-old organization that does really great work with young boys in the city between 12 and 18. And they've created this Journeymen program. And I want the Journeymen program to lead to careers.
Mm-hmm.
And the career that most of them will have is some type of blue collar job.
Well, in the trades, and I spoke with
Correct.
I spoke with someone earlier about this concept where, America, for some reason, for a while, and I think it's changing a little bit now, Larry, but for some reason it was so college bent. Everyone's got to go to college, and
Terrible.
which I think was really unhelpful and actually very harmful. And now we're at a place where the value of college monetarily actually might not be there for many people,
My
right?
son didn't go.
They might
My
be too
son's
much
22
in
years
debt.
old.
Right. They might be
Yeah.
too much in debt from it. And meanwhile, because if you're a 22 or 23-year-old graduate with a philosophy or art history or whatever degree from a prestigious university, you're $250,000 in debt. But if you're a 22 or 23-year-old and you've been a plumbing apprentice, you can actually start making a good living and creating your own life at 22, 23. And from a maturity standpoint, maybe well ahead than the peer that went to college. And so the value of college has changed, I think. I still think there's value
No
in
question.
meeting people from different walks of life, having discussions, creating a sense of understanding of how to learn, the discussion of critical thinking and being challenged with your own ideas. All of that is great. But to have young boys now to see that there's a much bigger path to financial success, livelihood, stability than college, I think is really important, especially for young men.
Yeah, you asked the question that got this whole conversation started was the financial challenges that I faced. And I have triggers in me.
Hmm.
So a big part of my world right now is owning one's own feelings and understanding who we are. And um, I'm working on a new book. I don't know if I'll ever publish it, called The Joy Molecule. And the joy molecule is all about this idea that joy has a definition. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody's definition is different, but my definition is knowing who I am, what I am, and why I am. That's a sense of joy and peace. And joy is expanded when you spend time with others that have shared heart.
Mm-hmm.
So conscious connection, C2, like H2. O is water, H2O, but joy is C2P, conscious
Mm-hmm.
connection plus purpose. So what I found in Africa was they were connected through their heart because they were living their instinctive purpose. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, their instinctive
Right.
purpose is survival. When you're in survival mode, everybody's connected to everybody because you're all trying to fight the planet. When you're beyond survival, like you and I, we need to find our individual purpose. Most of us, there's people that connect at their heart, no problem. And it's probably 10 to 15% of our population, is my guess, has a heart-centered connection, whether they have purpose or not. It's not an issue for them. But the majority of us that have been brainwashed to believe that everything lives between our ears and the voice in our head is real, that we need to open up our heart in order to connect with people deeply.
Yeah, it's
when
fun.
I got, good.
Well, what I was going to say is that you talked about kind of who you are, what you are, and why you are. It's that last piece of it, the why you are, I think is the one piece that most people struggle with. Why am I here? Why is my purpose in the world here? Yes, of course, it's to take care of children, family, community, but everybody's definition of why I'm here, I believe, just like a faith journey, is an individual answer.
Everybody's reason, everybody's why is different. I know my why.
What
I
is your
wake up
why?
every day without any questions. My why is to leave this planet infinitely better than I found it. That's
Hmm.
the simple answer. Um, who I am, I'm a natural connector. My gift is as a connector. I'm a really good business development person. I love the human creature. I love understanding the human creature. I love connecting with other human creatures. We are animals. At our core, we are animals, and survival is our number one instinct and our number one purpose. But you and I are beyond survival. So we need to figure out what goes on in our heart so we can connect more deeply because we need to find our own purpose.
Hmm.
And to me, that's it. I'm a gifted human in certain ways. And all of us have gifts. Just need to figure out what they are. And I've had the freedom to travel for 6 months and meditate every morning. And when I got back, summer of 2015, after taking our kids away, I started a business thinking that that was going to be my future. So it's been a really, really fascinating journey for me. But 9 months after I got back and I started with this plan that I had meditated through for now 4 months. So the first 2 months
Hmm.
were detox in Australia. Next 4 months, starting in Santorini, we went to Athens, got my wallet stolen, ended up in Santorini for 7 days. And even my wallet was stolen. Dude, whoever took the money needed it more than I did.
Sure.
I had the I had the platinum card from Amex. They wired me 500 euros. I called every credit card company within 20 minutes. They were all canceled. They shipped me cards. They shipped them to Santorini. I had them within 3 days. Everything was fine.
You're fine.
I had cards on my. I mean, I was well prepared for
Yeah.
whatever was going to happen. But I get to Santorini. I meet this entrepreneur who owns our Airbnb, and I start
Hmm.
hiking in the mountains. And I start meditating every morning, 40 minutes, sitting in peace, staring at my third eye, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, the world wants you to build a purpose-driven community. You've been spending all your time with these purpose-driven people. So I came back and I started what I knew. My company for 20 years was a peer group company. I brought together business owners. In the industry I was in, there were people that did the same thing in different cities, and we were very successful at that. We did really well. And then we ended up building a coaching practice and a leadership development practice, and we
Hmm.
did speaking, we did some M&A work, we sold some of our clients' companies. We did well. But when I started from scratch, 9 months in, I realized that what I was doing was not going to work.
Hmm.
And here I am with a 14 and 16-year-old, and I have no real stable income.
Right.
And everything that I was doing was not working. And
Hmm.
I went into the deepest, darkest depression of my life.
Of course you did.
Like,
It's almost like you
this is
saw
my
what happened.
triggers.
Yeah, it's your trigger, right? You saw what happened with your
Reliving
dad
my
when.
dad.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's amazing how these parallels come back in our life. I think that I think that we get these loops in our lives that come through, these recurring themes that we fall into or ensnare us, or it's just part of the plan of our journey or whatever it is. I have no idea, but I've seen it enough in people where these recurring patterns come up. So you were again in the moment that your dad was when you were 10 and your kids were 14 and 16.
3 times in 7 years.
Mm,
Deep. The last time it happened was last March. You saw it. I was going through it, and it was deep. It was dark. But the last time I figured out what triggers it all, it's
hmm.
my fear of going broke. And
Right.
what I've learned is that the world is always taking care of me. So March, I'm really leaving. So I tried to turn a conference, which you were heavily involved in, the cause
Hmm.
conference, into a business, and it didn't work. And Mary Walshock, who you know is from UCSD, and
Hmm.
she asked me the most incredible question, which made me walk away. She said, I love what you're doing, and I think what you're doing is necessary. And she said, why you?
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't have the emotional capital in San Diego. I don't have, I didn't grow up here. I don't
Yeah.
have the buy in. I had 9 years of actually controversy. I'm a New Yorker who's living in San Diego, and I am candid and forthright, and I
Right.
tell people what I think. And most people here don't like that. So people don't like because they don't know me, or they really like me because they like people that are candid. And I have very few people in the middle.
That's so
So
interesting that you brought the New York doesn't leave you. It probably doesn't. My hunch is that you can't get away from that.
I've
It just.
softened it a lot.
Hmm.
I'm different than I was when I moved here. I had to accept something when I moved here.
Interesting.
And people in San Diego will be, I don't know. So I've talked to a lot of people about this. San Diego compared to New York is not a business community. I love the startup community. I love the businesses here. I love everything about San Diego.
Uh-huh.
It's just not the same world that I was used to.
Sure.
So I needed to get used to what was here. A little bit provincial, a little bit long, old boy, good old boy community. And it takes a while to get in. It's taken me 9 years. But last March, when I walked away from the cause conference and I was looking for the next thing to do, I went through another dark time, probably about 30 days. The first time was probably 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Second time was probably 2 to 3 months.
So you're getting better
probably 30
at getting
days.
yourself out, right? You fall into these traps. You know that it's a trap, but you develop mechanisms and coping ideas and the intellectual and emotional fortitude to crawl out of those dark spaces.
No question. So the last time that it happened, we're in April, May, and my new partner, Ron Harrell, I've known for 10 years, invites me to a lunch and says, I want to sit down with you and I want to talk about this business I'm thinking of doing. We were going to do it with this other person. It didn't work out. I have this partner that I want to do it with, and you could be, and he showed me the business model. I'm like, that's my old company.
Right.
Except now I'm doing it with COOs instead of all different skills in a vertical industry. I'm doing it across industries with a vertical role.
Perfect fit.
And the woman he introduced me to is spectacular. She's from Spain. She's direct. She has no problems with my candor. She actually appreciates it and loves it. I've seen a lot of stuff, so I'm helping entrepreneurs get out of their own way. Mm-hmm. I provide them with business transformation. We help them do great work. We've got our first close to 10 clients in the first year. We're doing really good work for clients. We're making money. Everybody's enjoying it. The resources are enjoying the work. The clients are enjoying the resources that are working for them. And this has been a pleasure, and it's scalable.
Yeah, you know
so
what?
I see my future.
Right, you see your future in this. So you opened yourself up to the universe, and universe tends to conspire for you if you listen to it. And
yes.
And then it happens again where you again fall into a rhythm that aligns some of your purposefulness. And it's an interesting thing, Larry, because you can still develop the purposeful mentoring approach with Boys to Men mentoring, and it doesn't have to be completely knitted within your life. However, it's tangentially or adjacent to your profession, because it's still about cultivating young people and older people as they move into their career, helping them kind of figure out what they're doing professionally. So what I'm interested about that, because do you see then as these two parts of your life as where the Venn diagram is overlapping, but there's two distinct parts?
They're actually integrated. So I'll tell you why.
Tell me why.
And I tell people all the time. So I sat this morning with a lawyer, and he wants to do business development. He's involved with his university. And I said, what do you really care about? So he told me a couple of things he cares about. I'm like, you're 29 years old. I would get deeply engaged in the things you care about cause-wise. Mm-hmm. And use that as your business development methodology. Meet other people that have shared heart, because it'll change the connection with the other person. Makes it a lot easier to build deep, meaningful relationships. So I'm looking to build a community of businesses in San Diego that support Boys to Men. And most of them are going to be small to medium-sized businesses, which are a perfect target client for my business.
Sure.
I'm not doing it for my business. I'm doing it for the boys, but there's nothing wrong with sharing with the people that I'm asking to support Boys to Men, saying, oh, by the way, I have this company. You seem to be stressed, and you seem to be handling a million things. You're probably a visionary, which is what I am. And do you have a good number two to run your company for you while you can go do the things you love? And most people say, huh?
Right.
And that's what I do. So there's the first time in my career where I find a full overlap between the work I'm doing in the community, the work I do for my business. And if they never overlap, that's okay.
But it's an opportunity for overlap.
Very much aligned. Correct.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. I think that that's one of the things that I guess a lot of people want, right? This perfect stitch of purpose and profession, right? And that's kind of seems to be like not everybody wants it, but a lot of people thrive on that. But it seems to be that that's what you needed, and that's what you're ended up striving towards. We'll be right back.
I was at GE, I studied people. I mean, I've studied people my whole life. You're a New Yorker, go down to Washington Square Park, and you see the most amazing, eclectic group of humans in the world. So there's street performers, there's people playing chess, there's people dancing, there's people fooling around on a blanket. And I mean, you just see everything in one square block in New York City. So I've been watching people my whole life. And when I was at GE, I watched all these people that were working in companies. And then I watched all these people that had their own businesses. And when I had thought about what I wanted my life to look like at some point in the future, the people that had the life that I wanted all had their own business. Like, what am I doing working for a company when I know I want to be an entrepreneur? And I found a guy starting a radio show about entrepreneurship, and I'm like, okay, I'm all in. And that led me to peer groups, which led me to just so much stuff.
And it unfolded.
A journey that I couldn't have scripted.
Sure.
But I'm exactly where I need to be all the time. I truly believe if you've looked at Michael Singer's work in The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment, and I truly believe that the world is unfolding perfectly every day. It's our mismatched alignment with expectations that causes us to be unhappy and miserable or unfulfilled. And a lot of it has to do with just being present and being grateful for all the things that you have. Man, woman, child, I don't care who you are. My 24-year-old daughter, I've been spending the last decade of her life trying to explain to her that there's a difference between acting and reacting. Reacting is something happens and society has taught you a way to show your anger, a way to emote your fear, a way to... Where'd you learn that? That was from movies. That was from Madison Avenue. That was from Hollywood. That was from all this different stuff. That's from your parents. Is it true? Is it valid? Well, what if you could just say, I'm really angry right now. You don't have to get angry in the way that they make it in movies. You could just say, my blood is boiling and I'm really angry right now. And I'm trying to figure out how to deal with that. I know it's something that got triggered in me. I'm pretty sure you didn't do it on purpose. Never a conversation I could have had with my family.
Right.
But
That's interesting.
That's critical.
Right. You couldn't have that in your family. So you're trying to create that in your own family. Right. You're trying to pass that down. Another guy that we talked with, John Yarrington, is a story where we talked about being reactive versus responsive, kind of the same way that you're talking about it, responding to something in a way where you can think through your process. So you mentioned that for the last decade or so, you're talking to your daughter about, hey, these types of things and a way to see the world. So both of your children are young adults. Are you showing them, teaching them, talking to them, or just living a way so that they can learn from how you are living a purpose-driven career, or are they trying to figure out their own path? How do those conversations look?
I have two diametrically opposed children. So I have
Welcome to the club.
A daughter that's going to go get her master's in marriage and family therapy, and a capitalist little Republican who's living in Texas who just wants to make money.
Right.
And he's been all over the world. My daughter was on every continent by the time she was 15. My son has been to Africa and Europe and all of the United States. We've driven cross country 5 times. I mean, they've seen the world. And my daughter has taken it to say, I want to make an impact in the world. And my son has said, I see what everybody else has. I want what they got. And he's going down that path.
Interesting.
Will he make a difference? I don't know. I don't know whether he'll make a difference at some point in his life. I don't know if that's his path. And I've stopped judging people on that. That was a big part for me probably 10 years ago.
Wow.
If people weren't purpose-driven, I would be frustrated and angry. And now I'm just like, okay, they might not be my tribe.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
They're exactly where they need to be. I'm exactly where I need to be. And there were lots of things that happened over the last decade and even the last year that have taught me I'm on the path I'm supposed to be on. Things just show up in ways that are just magical. Magical. I can't even explain it. That people have shown up when they needed to. And I find it fascinating to be on this journey and watch it unfold.
So have you always been that open? I think that I might get this wrong, but I think one of the definitions of serendipity is like being aware of an opportunity that happens in the moment, and it's the awareness that has to come first, right? The openness to an opportunity that is coming in if you receive it. Is
You're
this
talking about
something that
manifestation.
is this something that you learned, or is this something that's always been in you?
No, I didn't understand it when I was a kid. So Boys to Men. If I were to boil down Boys to Men's process to teach kids
Mm-hmm.
between 12 and 18, your job is to stop blaming the world about who you are and start taking responsibility for what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's the transition from a boy to a man. I would say our society doesn't do that. Most men don't do that. Forget boys. We don't take personal responsibility. And our government is a blatant example of blaming others for your problems, at least previous regimes. And it's for me, challenging.
So I want to ask you to define that idea again, the transition from boy to man. The reason that I ask is that you did go through bar mitzvah, which is great. You probably, I mean, traditionally, from what I understand, that's the significance of the manhood transition, right? But
Sure.
I've been to a
13
lot
years
of
old,
bar
you have no idea what
mitzvahs.
the hell's going on.
Right. I've been to a lot of bar mitzvahs. I don't know any eighth grader who's actually a real man. Men have very nebulous transitions. There's not like a clear marker, and I talk about this
Yeah,
and kind of
it's
it's fluid, right? I mean, 30,000 years ago, you were a man when you could participate in the hunt and actually contribute to the hunt because the survival of the tribe depended upon you doing that. And the next
no
generations,
question.
we don't have that now. And with all of the distractions and all of the media that assails young boys about what they can and they can't be, I think, what relationships or sex should be like when they look at pornography and they think, is that actually how it is? Is that the real world when I'm 12 and 13? Should I expect that when I become sexually active? It's, I think, extraordinarily confusing. You now are in front of young boys, helping them transition to be men. What are you saying about manhood to them?
First of all, I don't run the organization. I when I volunteer, I have realized that I am not the facilitator. I know my role in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the entrepreneur behind the scenes that creates opportunities for the organization to grow.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that work for Boys to Men that are really good at this work,
Got it.
and that's what they do. But when I'm talking to boys, the one thing I will talk to them about is to stop blaming everything around you and your world around you and start taking responsibility for how your world shows up. If there's one message, that would be the message. Stop blaming your parents, stop blaming everybody. There's nothing holding you back other than you. And everything that's in your head is a story. And the story can change in a heartbeat. Everything we tell ourselves is a story. It's all made up. The Untethered Soul is probably the best book I've ever read about that. And there's other books that have taken me on this journey. All the purpose related stuff that you talk about. Halftime from Bob Buford and Second Mountain by
David Brooks.
David Brooks. I mean, those two books paved the way for me to realize that making money was not the solution. Making money to a certain point was great because it provided me freedom. But I did some experiences recently that have shown me that the only reason my business is going to do really well is so that I can fund projects that will make an impact in the world, not because I need to buy a massive house or drive a beautiful car or take massive, expensive vacations.
It
Most of my
becomes a
money is going to go
vessel.
to making an impact.
Right, because what I
It's
love
a
about
toolkit
that, yeah, that's the thing, Larry. What I love about it is that if you see your profession as a means to make the world a better place, right?
every day.
Every
It's
day.
all I do. Every day. I wake up in the morning. Did I leave the planet a better place than the day before?
Mm-hmm.
And what did I do to move it? So you know me, I network every day. I meet
Yeah.
people on a daily basis. And my project right now is to build this infrastructure of how do I help visionary founders of companies realize that they're playing out of their swim lane. They're doing work they should not be doing. And they need to find someone. This is the part that we don't understand. At least I didn't understand when I was an entrepreneur. And I'm still a visionary entrepreneur. I'm that guy who creates things. You look at my strength finders, I'm a strategist, futurist, connected, woo activator. So those things define how I see the world. And I am not a detailed analytic. If you see the new book by Patrick Lencioni, The Six Types of Working Genius,
Mm-hmm.
it's called Widget: wonder, innovation, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. So the wonder asks all the questions about why. The innovator
Sure.
creates the new ideas. The discernment picks from the new ideas and creates the ones that will matter. The
Mm-hmm.
galvanizing is keeping everybody moving in the right direction. The enablers actually work on the projects, and the tenacity
Yeah.
make sure they come to
And
conclusion.
they all have a part.
And most people are only good at a couple of them.
That's right.
And then they're mediocre at a couple, and they're not good at a couple. So that's my book. For me right now, that's the story.
Sure.
Is that if you're good at a couple and you're the innovator galvanizer or you're the innovator discernment person, then you're not the tenacity enable person. You need somebody like that on your team
Right.
so that you can get out of your own way and stop. I should never manage anyone.
Sure.
No one. That's not my skill set. That's not my gift.
Yeah.
My gift is finding people, motivating them, showing the future that they couldn't see was possible. Good at that. That's the futurist strategist part of me.
Mm-hmm.
I can paint a picture for people that they would never see on their own. We bought a house in Carlsbad. My ex walked into the house and said, "What did you buy?" Blue carpet, popcorn ceiling, flowered wallpaper in the bedroom. I said, "Just walk in the backyard." You
Right.
walk in the backyard, it's a 160-degree ocean view.
Right.
You can't buy an ocean view. You can't build one. You can gut a house and you can change it.
Right.
Over the next 4 years, we totally gutted the house, and it's a different house today with a spectacular view, and now it's a beautiful home.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
Well, and
my gift.
and that's what you do so well. And I think that as you started to grow up and get older yourself, you figured out exactly what you do best. And if I think typically if you do something that you love, you do it really well. And then if you do it really well, then you love it. And it's this virtual cycle of it's an upward spiral of energy of doing what you love and doing it well and doing well and you love it.
Living in your genius every day.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful way to wake up. And you had mentioned though about connecting and um, connecting people, figuring out who's in your tribe, who's not in your tribe. Are you becoming more selective, Larry, with people that you want to connect and be with, or are you becoming more open and then selective?
I would say both.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I live in a very big world. I'm an extreme extrovert. I give everybody an opportunity.
Sure.
But if they don't, I can tell within 5 minutes sometimes that they're not my people.
Sure.
But the sharks dressed as dolphins, those are the most confusing.
I love that analogy. The shark dresses dolphins. So I've got a couple more questions for you. You're on this path. You're at this space now. It seems where it's this beautiful stitching of the purpose and your profession. If you get to meet a 5-year-old future version of yourself, 5-year future version of yourself, what do you hope he's done?
Ooh. Oh, I hope he's built an infrastructure and a friend group for himself that is truly loving and caring and can communicate effectively with him.
Mm-hmm.
That he's a father to 2 children that are in beautiful, healthy relationships. That does work that I love every day. Makes a phenomenal living, not for myself, but for the ability to fund other things. I met a gentleman in 2015. Well, I met him in 1993, 94, 5, somewhere in that time frame. And he was my CPA. And I met him again in 2015 after I got back from my trip. I started coaching him one-on-one. And we're in San Diego, and we're walking around downtown. And I said, we went to Dubai. And my son loved all the Bugattis. And I said, I could never buy a car like that. I'd rather put 5 kids through college than spend money on that car. I drive a Tesla, but I spent $42,000 on it. It's not expensive. It's not a $250,000, $300,000 car. So we go to dinner. He ended up hiring me as his coach. And he says, "Wait a second, I got to go back to the car. I forgot something." So we get in the restaurant, and he says, I really need to tell you something. And I'm like, what do you want to say? He says, the thing I went back to the car, is a cashier's check for $350,000. He had sold 2 businesses. He was
Wow.
working on a third. He had made a lot of money, and his gift to himself was a Ferrari. And he said, I just want to apologize. I said, don't apologize.
Right.
If that's what you need
Yeah.
to feel fulfilled, and that's the gift you decided to give yourself, then go for it.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't do that myself. And there's no judgment in that. It's just
Right.
that wouldn't be my path. So if we do really well, I'll probably end up setting up a college foundation for boys to men, for kids that want to go to college that can't afford it.
Wonderful.
And I want to build the infrastructure for the blue collar community for those kids that don't go to college that need a career path and
a path into the
internship
trades.
program.
That's wonderful. Yes. I love it, Larry.
That's my
great.
future.
That's a great person to see 5 years from now.
That's 5 years from now.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see him. So my last question for you is one I ask all of my guests. And firstly, thank you for being on. I'm so grateful that you made the time for it. So who is someone that you know that I don't know that I should meet?
You probably don't know my friend Alexis Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
You know Alexis?
I don't.
So Alexis lives in Talmadge. Alexis and I met at TEDx San Diego in 2015. When I was going through my darkest time in 2016, he called me every morning. I'm doing, what's going on? And he was there for me. And he's got a beautiful partner, Wendy. And he's working on this project right now that is, he's a Black man who was born and raised in man of color, however you want to define it. Born and raised in Guyana, northern edge of South America. Father, first prime minister of Grenada. And he's always been fascinated by photography. And when Black Lives Matter happened during the pandemic, he started thinking about every time he's walked into a classroom, because he's a professional mediator, been very successful. And he's taught a lot of classes at USD. There was one time when a young man of color walked into his classroom, saw him in the front and said, oh, I must be in the wrong room. Because he didn't expect a Black professor. All of his professors were white.
Wow.
So Alexis is working on this project called Brilliance Exposed. And Brilliance Exposed is a photo essay, black and white, stunning black and white photos of men and women of color from NASA, from MIT, from you name it, all over the country. And he's looking to get some really super famous, all men and women of color that are involved in STEAM, science, technology, education, arts, and math.
Sure.
And he's a really spectacular human. And he's here in town, and he's been gaining followers for his project. He's about to connect with one of the top Black universities in the country to house this exhibit. Tiffany's wants to show it at all their stores. He's just gotten a lot of exposure.
That's great.
He's a beautiful man. Talks about ego a lot and the role of the ego in our world and the role of the ego in the man. So he'd be a person worth connecting with.
I'd love it. I'd love to meet him. That's wonderful. Well, Larry Kesslin, you are wonderful. I'm so grateful that you're here in San Diego making our community better. And I appreciate you learning through your journey to figure out what you do best, because by you doing what you do best, you're helping all of us get better. So I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for all you're doing in the world as well.
You got it. Wow. Larry Kesslin, man of purpose. Trying to live a life of purpose and pull purpose into his everyday job, but more importantly, into his everyday actions. You heard him. He wakes up every morning saying, how am I going to make this world a better place? What am I doing to do it? That's not just dreamy, oh, I want to be nice and do well. The man's got a plan. He's got a plan of how he can make the world a better place. He's got a plan about the way in which he's doing that. And the theme of his life has come over and over again of, I'm going to eject myself out of a situation where there's no heart, where I don't see a path forward that's meaningful, because I have to live a purposeful life in my everyday action. And so he's doing it every day. And I'm grateful for it. So, what did we learn from our friend Larry? I think that if you strive to find a purpose in your career and in your life, and you open yourself to the universe to let it unfold in that way, it could very work out for you that you can do that. And I do believe that if you have purpose in your life every day, you're going to be happier for it. All right. I wish that you find that purpose. I wish you find that happiness and that joy. And I wish you enjoy this podcast. I hope you also want to book a conversation. I'd love to learn about you and your life and what's bringing you joy. If you're struggling with purpose, or if you're moving towards it, and the journey that you have, because, we can all learn from your journey. We can all learn from the story that you share with us, so we can all get a little bit better together. And isn't that the point of it? So visit menfolkjourneys.com, book a conversation. I sure hope to speak with you soon. Word bid Falarid.